Welcome to the Rules of the Checkride, Part 7. In-aircraft rules during checkride. Please, if you haven't watched the introduction, the psychology of the pilot checkride, or the rules of the pilot checkride, Part 1 through 6, please exit now and watch them first. These videos follow a sequence and viewed otherwise will lessen its effects and may confuse you. First question. How quick do I have to begin a procedure or maneuver in the aircraft? There is no time requirement. You're not graded on how quickly you enter a maneuver or procedure, rather, how well it is performed. When the examiner asks you to perform a given procedure or maneuver, take your time. First, think about the maneuver, and when you have all your ducks in a row, begin the procedure or maneuver. However, while performing the maneuver, it is expected that you react in a timely fashion as required by the maneuver. Will the examiner be doing any radio communications? Be aware that all radio communications are your responsibility, not the examiner's. In a very rare occasion, there may be a situation that warrants the need for the examiner to use the radio. For instance, if there is some sort of conflict with ATC that the examiner feels is prudent to talk for clarification purposes, it's okay. Otherwise, you will always operate the radio. Will the examiner let me know the procedures and maneuvers to be performed in flight before we go in the aircraft? According to 91-103, each pilot in command shall, before beginning a flight, become familiar with all available information concerning that flight. Since you are the pilot in command, the examiner will make sure that a plan of action listing the scenarios that we cover, all the required maneuvers and procedures to be performed in flight is created. This list is arranged in a way to expedite the check and to minimize the time spent airborne. There should be no confusion during the flight as to what the examiner expects you to perform. However, the in-flight emergency procedures will not be listed. This is considered to be fair game because in reality, pilots never know when a change in plan is required. Keep in mind that there may be reasons beyond the examiner's control that may dictate a change of plan while in flight. For instance, if the plan was to go to XYZ airport to conduct a certain type of landing and at the time of arrival the airport was closed for any reason, such as a gear-up landing, then the flight will be diverted to a new destination in order to complete the required task. Will a sterile cockpit will be observed? This next topic is very important, so pay attention. While the aircraft is in motion during a critical phase, such as taxiing, takeoff, departing the airport area, or arriving at the airport area, a sterile cockpit will be maintained. The only verbal communications allowed between you and the examiner are those in which safety is in question. What can the examiner do for the pilot applicant in the aircraft? In an aircraft requiring a single pilot, the examiner can do the same thing that a passenger or the right seat may do. The examiner may hold a checklist or a chart and look for traffic, whether reported or not reported. The examiner is a non-flying passenger and should be treated as such. If the check ride involves a certain type of aircraft requiring two pilots and the examiner acts as a crew member, the examiner will perform all the duties of the required crew member. How will the exchange of control take place? If at any time during the flight the examiner is going to fly the aircraft, a three-part dialogue must take place. You must say to the examiner, "You have the flight controls." The examiner will acknowledge immediately by saying, "I have the flight controls." You will again state, "You have the flight controls," and must observe that the examiner actually has them, and then release the flight controls. When the flight controls are returned to you, follow the same procedure. There should never be a doubt as to who is flying the aircraft. If a view limiting device is going to be used, what's the proper procedure? The FAA requires that a briefing concerning the procedure for donning and removing the view-limiting device be established between you and the examiner before the flight. So here it goes. After the appropriate dialogue for transferring the flight controls, the examiner will be flying the aircraft and will instruct you to don the appropriate view-limiting device. After donning it and ready to continue flying, you will ask for the flight controls and will fly the aircraft solely by the use of the flight instruments. When the required task is finished and a proper exchange of control takes place, the examiner will advise you to remove the view-limiting device. Will the examiner try to distract me while flying? Numerous studies indicate that many accidents have occurred when pilots have been distracted during critical phases of flight. In order to evaluate your ability to utilize proper control techniques while dividing attention both inside and outside the cockpit, the examiner shall cause realistic distractions during the flight portion of the practical test. Remember, the oral continues in the aircraft. If you're busy, don't stop flying the aircraft in order to address the examiner's questions or distraction. You must let the examiner know, stand by. When you feel that the question or distraction can be addressed, then let the examiner know. How does the manufacturer's recommendations apply during the flight check? The manufacturer's recommendations found in the POH must be heeded. Nobody can legally override them. You must not do anything contrary to the manufacturer's recommendation. While performing procedures or maneuvers, you should not allow the aircraft performance and limitations to be exceeded. If the examiner determines that exceeding aircraft performance and limitations is going to take place, the examiner will take over the controls prior to the event. Can I repeat a maneuver or procedure? A maneuver or procedure can be repeated if one of the four following conditions apply. Discontinuance of the maneuver. According to 8900.2, a completed unsatisfactory maneuver may not be repeated. The operative word in this sentence is completed, which means that if the pilot recognizes a mistake and discontinues the maneuver or procedure promptly, the maneuver or procedure may be started again. On the other hand, once the maneuver is completed, it cannot be repeated. A maneuver may also be discontinued for a valid safety reason. For example, an approach to a landing is aborted and you execute a go-around or other procedure to modify the original planned maneuver. The key term in this sentence is a valid safety reason. For instance, collision avoidance. The performance of a maneuver may be interrupted due to your actions to avoid other aircraft or the examiner's intervention on the flight controls to avoid another aircraft which you could not have seen due to a view-limiting device or other factor. Misunderstood request. A legitimate misunderstanding may occur where you may not understand the examiner's request to perform a specific maneuver. However, your failure to understand how to perform the maneuver being requested is not grounds for repeating a maneuver. And 4, there are other factors such as a condition which distracts the examiner and cannot adequately observe your performance of the maneuver, like conflicting traffic or ATC instructions. If the examiner determines that a task is incomplete or the outcome uncertain, the examiner may require the applicant to repeat that task or portions of the task. This provision has been made in the interest of fairness and does not mean that instruction, practice, or the repeating of an unsatisfactory maneuver is permitted during the certification process. Take this one to the bank. What would happen if I go around during a landing? The FAA strongly promotes to go around. Whenever you're not comfortable or have any concerns with the safe outcome of the impending landing, go around. During the practical test, this principle doesn't change. The examiner may ask you, though, what prompted you to go around. The question is asked to determine if the reasons for your go around compares with the examiner's observations. The exception is the power of 180-degree accuracy landing, which is a one-time shot, unless there is a valid safety issue that warrants a go-around. Will the flight check be unsatisfactory if I make a mistake? We can define the term Checkride in 2 words. Folks, error management. The examiners know you're going to make mistakes, just like you did in your last flight and the flight before that, and just like I do. Remember this, a notice of disapproval will never be issued because you made a mistake. The notice of disapproval will be issued if you don't fix it promptly or the mistake cannot be fixed, such as exceeding the tolerances on a short field landing by touching down either before the chosen touchdown point or past the required distance. Remember, pilots are monitors. We're monitoring a heading, an airspeed, an altitude, some kind of needle, communications, traffic. If something is not where it should be, we have to fix it promptly. Listen, if you drive a car, what do you do when the car goes over the white line? You get back to the center, on the lane quick. When a mistake is fixed promptly, it's like the mistake never happened. There are no consequences. If the mistake is not fixed promptly, there may be consequences. So, your mindset, come Checkride day, should not be that you will perform perfectly in the flight. Don't do that. It will destroy you. Your mindset should be as follows. I know I'm going to make mistakes during the flight. I also know that I will recognize them and fix them promptly before the examiner gets into the picture.